The lights felt too bright for someone like him. Even standing backstage, far from the roaring audience, the glow from the stage seeped through the curtains and wrapped around his thin frame. He could hear everything. The laughter, the chatter, the occasional boo from impatient voices waiting to be entertained. Each sound pressed against his chest like a reminder, this was not his world. Mateo gripped the edges of his worn jacket, fingers trembling just slightly. It wasn't fear exactly. He had felt fear before. Real fear, the kind that came from not knowing if there would be food the next day, or if the rain would flood their small wooden house again back in Cebu. This was something else. This was exposure. Mateo Santos. A voice called. He lifted his head. That's you. You're up next. He nodded quickly, swallowing hard. His throat felt dry, but he had learned long ago how to sing through discomfort. Hunger had never stopped him before. Neither had exhaustion. Still, as he stepped closer to the curtain, his heart began to pound harder. The sound of the audience grew louder, clearer now. And next up, the host announced with a playful tone, we have a young man all the way from the Philippines. Let's see what he's got. A few claps echoed. Not many. Mateo closed his eyes for a brief moment. He saw his mother's face. Tired, gentle, always smiling even when there was nothing to smile about. He remembered the nights she would hum softly while sewing clothes under a dim light, telling him, your voice is your gift. Don't hide it. He exhaled slowly. Then he stepped onto the stage. The brightness hit him instantly, forcing his eyes to squint for a split second before adjusting. The audience stretched out before him like an ocean, rows upon rows of faces, some curious, some indifferent, some already skeptical. And then there were the judges. 4 figures seated behind the long desk, each one watching him with varying degrees of interest. One leaned back casually, another glanced at their notes. And then there was Simon. Arms crossed, expression unreadable, eyes sharp. Mateo walked to the center mark. Hi, the host said gently, stepping beside him. What's your name? Mateo. Mateo Santos, he replied, his voice soft but steady. Mateo, how old are you? 17. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 17, wow, and you've come a long way, haven't you? Yes, sir. From Cebu. A few polite claps. And what are you going to perform for us today? Mateo hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Not because he didn't know, but because he knew exactly how this would sound. I will sing. A faint chuckle echoed from somewhere in the audience. Then another. Mateo felt it immediately, the shift in energy. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The way a few people leaned back, already expecting mediocrity. The way someone whispered loudly enough to be heard, another singer. Even one of the judges gave a small, almost amused smile. Simon leaned forward slightly. Okay, Mateo, he said. Let's hope this is worth it. More laughter. Not loud, but enough. Mateo's grip tightened at his sides. For a moment, something inside him flickered, something fragile. Then it steadied. Because this wasn't new. He had sung in markets where people ignored him. On streets where some mocked him. At small gatherings where his voice had to fight against noise and disinterest. This was just another crowd. Except bigger, and louder, and far more ready to doubt him. The music cue was given. A soft piano intro filled the air. Mateo closed his eyes, and for a moment, nothing happened. The audience shifted. Someone coughed. A faint laugh slipped through again. Then, he sang. The first note was so soft, it almost felt like it would disappear into the vastness of the room. But it didn't. It carried, clear, pure, gentle, the kind of note that didn't demand attention, but earned it. A few people in the audience leaned forward. The second line came, slightly stronger. There was something in his tone, not just skill, but emotion. A quiet ache that wrapped around each word like it belonged there. The laughter stopped, not abruptly, but gradually, like a fading echo. Mateo opened his eyes as he continued, his voice growing with each phrase. It wasn't loud yet, but it was controlled, deliberate. The judges exchanged quick glances. Simon's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. His arms slowly uncrossed. The song built slowly, the piano swelling underneath his voice. And then came the moment. The note. The one Mateo had practiced countless times, late at night, when the world was asleep and the only sound was the hum of distant traffic. He took a breath, and released it. The note soared, not just high, but powerful, rich, resonant. It filled the entire room, climbing higher and higher without breaking, without strain. The audience froze, completely. No whispers, no movement, just that voice. Even the judges sat still now. One of them blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what they were hearing. Another leaned forward, hands clasped. Simon's eyes narrowed, not in criticism, but in focus. Matteo held the note longer than anyone expected. Then, just as it seemed impossible to sustain, he shifted, effortlessly, dropping into a softer, more delicate tone that carried just as much emotion. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This wasn't just singing. This was storytelling. Every word felt lived in. Every note carried something real. Pain, hope, longing. Matteo wasn't just performing. He was revealing something. And people were listening. Really listening. The final chorus approached. The music swelled. Matteo's voice rose with it. Stronger now, fuller, unafraid. The same audience that had laughed moments ago now sat on the edge of their seats, eyes fixed on him. One woman covered her mouth. A man in the front row shook his head in disbelief. And Simon leaned forward completely now, elbows on the desk, his gaze locked onto Matteo. No smirk, no skepticism, just attention, pure attention. Matteo reached the final line. His voice softened again, almost like a whisper carried on melody. And then, silence. The music ended. For a split second, no one moved. It was the kind of silence that only happens when something truly unexpected has just occurred. Then, the room exploded. Applause erupted like a wave crashing all at once. People jumped to their feet, cheering, clapping, shouting. A standing ovation. For him. Matteo blinked, stunned. He hadn't expected this. Not like this. The sound was overwhelming, but in a completely different way now. Not judgment, not doubt, but recognition. The judges stood too, one by one. All except Simon. He remained seated, but not because he wasn't impressed. He was watching, still, carefully. Matteo looked toward him, heart racing again, but this time for a different reason. Finally, Simon stood, slowly, deliberately, and began to clap. The crowd grew even louder. Matteo's eyes filled with tears he hadn't planned to shed. The host rushed back onto the stage, almost laughing in disbelief. Matteo, what just happened? Matteo shook his head slightly, overwhelmed. I don't know. Well, I do, the host said. You just turned this entire room upside down. The judges sat back down, and the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. Feedback. The first judge spoke, voice still full of amazement. Matteo, that was not what I expected. At all. That was beautiful. Another nodded. Your control, your emotion, you didn't just sing, you connected. That's rare. More applause. Then, it was Simon's turn. The room quieted instantly. Simon adjusted the microphone, his expression thoughtful. Matteo, he began. A pause. You know, when you walked out here, and you said you were going to sing, I'll be honest. Matteo held his breath. I didn't expect much. A few nervous laughs. Simon continued, his tone steady. In fact, I thought this might be one of those auditions we forget very quickly. Matteo nodded slightly. But, Simon said, leaning forward again, within about 10 seconds, you made me realize how wrong I was. The audience clapped. Simon raised a hand slightly, continuing. What you did was incredibly clever. You didn't try to impress us immediately. You pulled us in. You made us listen. He paused again. And then you completely took over the room. The applause grew louder. Simon's voice softened just a little. That's not something you can teach. That's something you have. Matteo's tears finally fell. So let me say this clearly, Simon added. That was outstanding. The crowd erupted again. Matteo covered his face briefly, overwhelmed. The host laughed. I think we know where this is going, but let's make it official. Yes or no? One by one, the judges gave their answers. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. 3 yeses. All eyes turned to Simon. He didn't rush. He looked at Matteo for a moment, really looked. Then he smiled, just slightly. It's a yes from me. The room exploded once more. 4 yeses. Mateo staggered back a step, hand over his mouth. He had done it. Not just survived the stage, but conquered it. The same crowd that had laughed at him just minutes ago was now chanting his name. Mateo, Mateo, Mateo. He laughed through his tears, shaking his head in disbelief. As the music swelled again and the lights dimmed slightly, Mateo looked out at the audience one more time. This time, he didn't see doubt. He saw belief. And somewhere, far beyond the lights and the noise, he imagined his mother watching. Smiling. Because the boy who once sang just to be heard had finally made the world listen.